I never imagined that locking a man in my office would lead to heartbreaking revelations. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It began with a knock, sharp and impatient, echoing through the stillness of my cluttered space. The air felt electric, charged with tension. My heart raced. What secrets did he bring? What truths were waiting to unravel? There he was, eyes darting, the flicker of fear barely hidden beneath his bravado. My office had never felt so small, so suffocating. I could smell the sweat on him, the distinct odor of anxiety. The truth was, he wasn't just a man. He was a storm brewing, filled with chaos that threatened to spill over. I knew him well. Or at least I thought I did. My colleague, Greg. Always so respectable, so put together. But now, in this moment, his shaking hands betrayed him. What had he done? The dim light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the lines of worry that seemed to deepen by the second. My legs felt as though they were rooted to the ground. I couldn't escape this, nor did I want to. The thrill of the unknown wrapped around me like a shroud. As he spoke, his voice trembled, each word a fragile whisper. You need to know, he said, the weight of his confession bearing down on me. I leaned closer, breath hitching in my throat. My mind raced. Was he about to share something that would change everything? The silence hung between us, thick and heavy. Flashbacks of laughter over coffee, shared late-night work emergencies, seeped into my memory. How could this man, one I had trusted, capable of something so potentially destructive? My heart thudded painfully as I imagined all the scenarios, each worse than the last. He took a deep breath, the air catching in his chest like a sudden gasp of realization. It's not just about the job. It's personal. My stomach twisted. What did he mean personal? I could see the desperation in his eyes, the plea for understanding, but all I could feel was the tightness in my chest, the fear of something I hadn't grasped yet. With every word, I felt us dancing on the brink of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath us. The world outside faded into a blur. I was losing myself in this moment, waiting for the inevitable plunge. And just when the truth seemed ready to spill out, he fell silent. The room thickened with anticipation. I held my breath, poised on the edge of discovery. What was he hiding? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence felt like an eternity, the air thick with unspoken words, until at last, Greg's eyes widened as though a dam had broken in his mind. I can't keep it from you anymore, he murmured, each syllable dragging a weight I struggled to bear. You have to know it's about my brother. My pulse quickened. His brother? It wasn't what I'd anticipated. What about your brother? I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper, fear creeping in, fear of what I might learn, fear of the vulnerability creeping into our conversation. I had seen Greg as the rock in our chaotic workplace. Now, with a single sentence, it felt as though the foundation was cracking. Last month he was diagnosed, he said, voice thick like molasses, trying hard to filter emotion from reality. Lung cancer, stage 4. I couldn't. The words caught in his throat, and he clenched his fists tighter. I didn't know how to tell anyone. He's the last family I have. I was afraid. The weight of his confession crashed over me like a wave. Suddenly, the man before me transformed from an enigma wrapped in fear to a raw, broken soul, struggling to navigate the dark tide of grief threatening to consume him. My mind swung between disbelief and compassion as his pain unfurled, each layer peeling back his sturdy facade. I get it, I said softly, matching his vulnerability. You didn't want to burden anyone. His gaze flickered to the floor, shame creeping into his expression. Instead, I let myself drown in secrets. I thought if I kept it in, I could protect him, protect myself. But now? His voice broke, and I could see tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. I don't know how to face him. It feels so unfair. He's been my rock, and now he stopped, taking deep and shaky breaths as if each inhale would help him find a way to calm the tempest inside him. In that moment, I reached out, placing my hand over his trembling one in silent solidarity. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin, the frantic pulse of a heart that beat with despair. You're not alone, Greg. You have people here who care. We can face this together. He looked up, searching my eyes for a flicker of hope. In a world that felt so dark to him, I hoped my presence could shine through, if only for a brief moment. What kind of courage did it take to be vulnerable? I admired him now. Watching the man I thought I knew reveal the marrow of his being made me feel connected to him, and suddenly, our work struggles seemed so small compared to the weight of life and death. But as he nodded, his face still etched with worry, something shifted within me. I can't believe I didn't notice, I admitted, guilt creeping in. I should have been there for you. Why didn't you say something sooner? We could have supported each other. It's not your fault, Greg replied, his eyes softening with understanding. I was afraid of how people would see me, but more than that, I didn't want pity. I wanted to hold it together. But now he hesitated, the cracking shell of his bravado layer by layer giving way to unfiltered emotion. Now, I'm afraid of losing him forever. A sharp pang of understanding pierced through me. I recognized this familiar fear. It was something I had been grappling with for years. My mind drifted to the faces of friends I had lost, the friends I had forsaken in my own struggles. I had faced grief before, but helplessness still echoed in my soul. As if sensing the weight of the moment, Greg suddenly stood, pushing away from the desk. I need to go, he stammered, and I could see panic flaring in his eyes. I can't deal with this right now. Before I could protest, he turned on his heel and rushed to the door. The primal need to escape engulfed him, but in his desperation, I couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in my chest. Wait! I called out, the urgency of my voice silencing even the hum of the fluorescent lights above. What if there's something more? We could. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob, terror mixing with something unnameable in his eyes. I can't. And with that, he vanished down the hallway, leaving me alone in the silence of my office once again, the walls closing in like prison bars. But as I sat there, the weight of despair clung to me still, fractured thoughts raced through my mind. What if he left without saying goodbye to his brother? What if he faced this alone? Just then, there was another knock at the door. The quiet knock seemed fragile, so unlike the urgent push of the earlier moment. I didn't have to answer. I knew it was another colleague, but who would it be? Could it be someone with answers? Another secret that would shape the trajectory of my life and Greg's in ways we couldn't foresee? As the door creaked open, I held my breath, my heart pounding, ready to confront whatever truth awaited me on the other side. The door swung open slowly, revealing Lisa, a bright spot in our office hallways, though her expression shifted as she stepped inside. She leaned against the doorframe, her bright smile faltering when she saw the remnants of my emotional storm. I sensed the air thickened with the fragility of the moment, as if both of us were teetering on the edge of something monumental. Hey, I knocked, but she hesitated, glancing around, her gaze landing on the cluttered desk, then back to me. Is everything okay? Her concern wrapped itself around me, offering a momentary refuge from the heaviness that filled my chest. Not really, I admitted, forcing the vulnerability through the cracks of my facade. It was an admission born from empathy, not just for Greg but for myself, too. Greg's brother is seriously ill. He just left. I didn't know how to help him. Lisa's brown eyes widened, a kind of understanding blossoming there that spoke of shared hurt and compassion. Oh, God. I had no idea. She stepped further into the room, closing the door behind her. The act felt weighty, sealing us into a space of trust. What can we do? It was a simple question, yet it echoed with significance. My mind flashed to the countless moments I had shied away from facing the raw vulnerability of others or even allowing my own pain to surface. "I'm not sure," I murmured, letting the fatigue seep into my tone. "He feels so lost. How can I help someone when I feel like I'm drowning too?" Lisa crossed the room, positioning herself closer to me, her warmth a balm. "Maybe it's just about being there," she suggested gently. "Sometimes, just sitting in silence with someone can mean more than you know." Something inside me jerked at her sincerity. The tears I had held at bay threatened to break loose, but I swallowed hard instead. "I wish I could be that for him. I wish I could fix it." She reached out, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "You can't fix it. None of us can. All we can do is show up. If he left your office like that, he doesn't want to be alone. Maybe it's time to remind him he doesn't have to be." Her words resonated deeper than I expected. They extended an olive branch, an invitation to break the cycle of isolation that we often inflicted on ourselves in times of crisis. "You're right," I said, a flicker of resolve igniting within me. He needs to know he's not alone in this. He needs a friend." Just as another wave of determination surged within, my phone buzzed loudly, shattering the moment. I glanced at the screen, heart freezing for a moment. It was Greg. "He's calling," I gasped, my heart racing in sync with the brimming hope in my chest. "Answer it," Lisa encouraged, her eyes wide and expectant. The screen flickered again as I hesitated. What if he was calling to shut me out completely? What if the moment had passed? Yet beneath my fear, there was a yearning for a chance to reach out a hand in the darkness. Gathering my resolve, I swiped across the screen and pressed the phone to my ear. "Greg?" My voice trembled slightly, echoing my inner turmoil. "Can we talk?" His voice was shaky, raw, a stark contrast to the man I often saw composure from. The vulnerability caught my breath, a lifeline being cast out across the tumultuous waters of his despair. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing as sparks of hopeful energy surged. "Where are you?" "I don't know," he sighed, surrendering to the moment. I needed to get away. Can you meet me at our favorite coffee shop?" I proposed, sensing that this conversation was far too important to have alone in the oppressive confines of my office. There was a pause on the line, and with it, I could almost hear the threads of his thoughts weaving in the silence, his struggles, his fears, and perhaps even a sliver of hope beginning to emerge. "Okay," he finally agreed, the words heavy yet almost relieved. "Give me a few minutes." As he hung up, I felt a sensation tighten at my core in anticipation, mingling with the fear and heaviness of what lay ahead. I locked eyes with Lisa, who mirrored my unease but also a sense of pride for having cracked open the shell of silence. "Thank you," I whispered, a soft acknowledgement for her kindness. "Go," she urged, her voice filled with a warmth that instilled courage. "He's waiting for you." With renewed strength, I collected my things and rushed out, my mind racing with thoughts of Greg and the gaping wound of uncertainty we would have to navigate together. Yet just as I turned to leave, a thought struck me, cold and heavy as a stone. What if Greg wasn't the only one hiding? What if his brother had known all along and felt the same isolation? No sooner had I stepped into the elevator than my phone rang again. This time, it was unfamiliar, a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank into an abyss of dread. I hesitated, glancing at the unknown caller ID, dread settling into my stomach. I answered, bracing myself for what could be the worst news of all. "Hello?" My voice was barely audible, tension thickening. "The AIR.is this Matt?" The voice on the other end was deep and steady but laced with an undercurrent of urgency. "Who is this?" I needed to know. The moment felt like it held so much in balance, the weight of each word pressed down like a leaden shroud. "Please listen. It's about Greg's brother." The air outside felt thick, as if the weight of the world hung low over the city. I stepped out of the elevator, my heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. I had expected chaotic thoughts, doubts that danced around my head, but now all that filled my mind was this low, steady buzz of anxiety fueled by the unknown voice on the other end of the line. "Is this Matt?" The voice had asked, and a chill cascaded down my spine. Everything in me clenched, the way it does when a truth is on the verge of being exposed. "Yes," I replied, urgency propelling my words. "What do you know about Greg's brother? I need you to stay calm." "My name is Jacob. I'm a family friend, a close one. I think it's important you hear what I have to say." That I took a breath as I leaned against the cold brick wall outside the office, my heart racing against my ribcage like a trapped bird. "Go on, Greg. Is he struggling?" "Not just with his brother's illness. There's something you need to understand about their family." His voice trembled slightly, and in that moment, fragments of despair swirled around us, binding us together in an invisible web of shared pain. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Please, I'm listening. There are complications more than what he told you. His brother, Daniel, has been battling this illness for a long time, a fight that's been kept under wraps. But there's also a history of mental health issues in the family. It's profoundly impacting Greg right now. He feels helpless. It's deep, Matt. He feels he can't save Daniel, and that's eating him alive." Beneath the weight of Jacob's words echoed the ugly truth I had sensed in Greg from the beginning, a hidden turbulence, like a storm cloud lurking just below the surface. "What does he need?" I asked, desperate to discern how I could reach past the barriers swirling between us. "That he needs someone to understand, someone who can break through the facade he puts on. He's always been the rock for everyone else, now he needs someone to be there for him. Will you be that person?" The question struck my heart with staggering force. I couldn't tell if I was ready for what this meant, the depths of grief, the unfathomable trials. But even as doubt crept in, the memories of Greg's laughter, his shared smirks, and the moments of joy lingered in my chest, reminding me that he was more than just a friend in turmoil. He was a person I cared for deeply, and if there was any chance I could help him find his way again, I owed it to him to try. "Of course I will," I promised, my voice steadier with resolve. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. He just disappeared for a while. But he'll be at the coffee shop soon," Jacob replied. "Please, don't take it lightly. He's at a breaking point that I want. Thank you for reaching out." Then, the call disconnected, leaving me in a shroud of uncertainty as I stood in front of the coffee shop, the familiar sign swinging gently in the wind. Would Greg be there, heart shredded, waiting for me to stitch it back together? The door swung open, and the bell chimed nervously. Inside, the air was thick with the rich scent of brewed coffee mingled with the sweet aroma of pastries. I scanned the room, searching for Greg. My pulse quickened as I spotted him in his usual corner. He looked overwhelmed, lost in thought, fingers gripping the cup like it was his only anchor to reality. As I walked toward him, something shifted in the atmosphere, a premonition that something monumental was about to unfold. The intensity of his gaze met mine, but it didn't bring the security I hoped for. Instead, I saw shadows lurking beneath his surface, a storm brewing in those familiar eyes. "Hey," I said softly, lowering myself into the seat opposite him. "I'm glad you're here." Greg looked at me, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw gratitude flash across his features. But it was fleeting, extinguished by a glimmer of something darker that I couldn't quite place. "I wasn't sure if you would really show up," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "That I promised I would," I replied, reaching out tentatively to bridge the widening gulf between us. "Jacob called me the..." Light dimmed in Greg's eyes, and he exhaled such a heavy breath that it seemed to carry the weight of years. "So you know," he murmured, pain embedding itself deep within his tone. "That I know you're struggling, Greg," I said gently. "I want to help you carry this. That I don't want to be a burden," he murmured, his gaze dropping to the table as if the weight of my words had become unbearable. "From what Jacob said, I think you've been carrying this burden for way too long." Greg's lips tightened, and I watched as a flicker of defiance rose within him. "You don't understand," he said, shaking his head, almost pleading me not to push. Before I could say anything else, Greg's phone buzzed violently on the table, and he froze, the color draining from his face. This time, it wasn't just fear that filled his expression, it was dread, palpable and shattering. "Greg?" I asked, uncertain of what I might find. I have to take this," he said, his voice trembling as he reached for his phone, hope slipping through my fingers like sand. He turned away briefly to answer, his back to me, and as he lifted the call to his ear, I could sense the storm erupting just beneath the surface. "Hello?" He answered, his voice drifting like smoke. I wished I could hear the words, feel the dark energy rising, but I was trapped in my seat, locked in a moment that felt heavy and filled with possibility. Then, abruptly, Greg turned back to me, his eyes wide, and just that fast, I knew his world was about to come crashing down even further. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope, the weight of Greg's tense posture palpable. His expression shifted from fretful to horrified as he placed the call in the middle of our fragile moment. "It's Daniel," he whispered, his voice cracking at the name that hung in the air like a specter. My heart sank with him, wings of dread flapping wildly in my chest that I reached across the table instinctively, wanting to offer comfort, but the invisible wall between us seemed to grow taller. Greg faced me with a haunted look, tears pooling dangerously at the corners of his eyes. "I thought I had more time," he murmured, as if those words were raw incense that might absolve the pain creeping inward. "What do you mean?" I asked gently, hoping to coax the truth from him, but the fear swirling in his eyes told me this was more than simple illness. Greg's voice trailed off, the horrifying weight of his reality pressing against his throat. "He's deteriorating faster than we thought. Wasn't ready for this. I thought I had a few more months, maybe." A lump formed in my throat. The reality of what was happening was unfurling in layers around us, and I didn't know how to comfort him without knowing how deep the fractures ran in his heart. Like a ship sailing into turbulent waters, his voice cracked with anguish. If I'd just done more, if I was him instead of me." "Don't say that," I urged. "You can't think like that. You're not responsible for his illness." The corner of his mouth twisted, a jigsaw of pain breaking across his features. "But I could have been a better brother. Could have been there more," he confessed, choking back a sob as he leaned his elbows on the table. The cafe around us faddied, a distant hum of steamers, clinking mugs, and murmurs drowned out by the pounding of my own heartbeat. I wanted to reach out and shelter him from the storm brewing inside, but every time I thought I saw a glimmer of light in his eyes, it was snuffed out, leaving only shadows to flicker in the depths. "That I know you want to be strong for him," I said, willing every ounce of empathy I had into my words. "But strength doesn't mean bearing the weight alone. It's okay to let others in, to be vulnerable." Greg dropped his gaze, fingers trembling as he absently traced the rim of his coffee cup. "Vulnerability isn't an option for me," he said raggedly. "My family, we don't do that. It's always been about standing firm." "Maybe it's time to break that cycle," I suggested softly, my voice encouraging. "You aren't alone in this. I'm here, Greg. You don't have to be the rock, let me be part of this with you." He looked up at me, and in that moment, something flickered. A brief spark of connection, a momentary bridge between the abyss he inhabited and the hope I offered. But then it flicked away, extinguished by the flood of despair that washed over him. "You don't understand what that means for me, Matt. It means admitting that I'm scared." "I do understand. We all have fears," I said, wishing to project my strength onto him. But the truth was, standing in front of him, I felt utterly helpless. I didn't know how to be the lifeline he needed while balancing my own fears of sinking under the weight of his. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again, sharper this time, an urgent vibration against the wood. He glanced at the screen and instantly looked stricken, his face draining of color. "I have to go," he said, scrambling to stand, knocking over the now cold cup on the table, coffee spilling like a dark omen. "Wait. Greg." Panic surged through me as I reached for him, desperate to keep him tethered to this moment. My heart raced at the thought of losing him when he was so close to finally letting someone in. He hesitated at the door, shoulders stiff and muscles taut, as if the very act of asking for help would unravel everything he had fought so hard to maintain. "You don't get it. he shot back, his voice sharp. If I don't handle this, if I don't go to him now. The words hung in the air like a threat, and the desperate look in his eyes sent a chill through my bones. You're not alone in this. Stay with me. I pleaded, scrambling to find the words that would anchor him here. He turned, a raw mix of emotions churning within him. What if I don't know how to stop him from slipping away? Then we'll figure it out together, I said, my voice trembling as I reached further. Please, stay a little longer. Don't shut me out when it matters the most. But Greg hesitated, torn by a tempest of loyalty and pain, whether to stand firm or finally let someone else in. Our eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, it felt like we were on the edge of something monumental. Then, without another word, he slipped through the door, leaving me to entomb my growing fear in the silence of our abandoned table. The bell chimed like a funeral dirge, and I was left grappling with the terrible reality that every second I stood still could mean another moment lost. Just then, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket, tearing my focus from the fragile remnants of our moment. It was Jacob. I answered, heart pounding. Matt, his voice was urgent and strained. You need to come to the hospital. It's Daniel, it's bad. As the room spun around me, the fragments of my world shattered like glass, and I realized with icy clarity that I was not just an observer anymore. Suddenly, I was entwined in a fate much larger than my own. The fluorescent lights of the hospital flickered overhead, casting a sterile glow that illuminated the chaos around me. I was standing by the entrance, heart racing, clutching my phone, still echoing with Jacob's words. Matt, you have to hurry. He had urged, the desperation in his voice a stark contrast to the antiseptic calm of the waiting room. He might not make it. I swallowed hard, forcing the cold realization to settle deep within me. This wasn't just Greg's brother I was about to confront, it was the impending loss of the person who had always been a steady presence, full of laughter and familiarity. I took a breath, pushing through the sliding glass doors and into the whirlwind of activity inside. The waiting area was crowded, filled with solemn faces and muffled sobs. Families clung to each other as if mere touch could shield them from despair. A mother whispered to her child about the power of hope, while a husband leaned heavily against the wall, watching the doctors as if they were lifelines thrown into turbulent waters. Each moment felt eternal, the ticking clock echoing like a harbinger of doom. I spotted Jacob sitting hunched over in a chair, his face pale and drawn. When he saw me, he straightened, dread pouring from his expression. He's in critical condition. They're trying to stabilize him, he said, his voice low but shaken. I don't think Greg has been informed yet. He needs to know. It hurt knowing that Greg had fled just moments before this impending storm. I scanned the room, desperate for his familiar silhouette, but all that surrounded me was the haze of uncertainty. What if he blames himself? I murmured, feeling the tremors of guilt intertwine with my fear. It's not about blame right now, Jacob said. We stay here for him. For Daniel. A nurse glided past us, her expression unreadable, but her kind eyes offered a sliver of solace. She stopped to ask if we were family. Only for support, I replied, knowing that none of us would be able to bear the weight of this alone. I felt the heat of unshed tears behind my eyes as I turned back towards Jacob. What if he doesn't pull through? What if Greg never forgives himself? Then we hold each other. We give space for the anger and grief. He said so matter-of-factly that it struck me. All the assumptions I had made about Greg's stoicism were shattered. No brother should have to navigate the labyrinth of loss alone, let alone while standing at the edge of possibility. As we waited, moments of kindness punctuated our agony. A woman offered Jacob a pack of crackers, shaking her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. A grandfather, visiting his grandson, offered words of encouragement, reminding Jacob and me that hope could often flourish in the most barren of soils. But mostly, the clock ticked mercilessly forward, mushrooming our anxiety. Each second might mean life or death for Daniel, and we felt utterly powerless like spectators at a performance we didn't want to witness. Just as the tension became unbearable, the doors to the ER swung open and a doctor emerged, eyes scanning the waiting area. A hush fell, and I felt the collective breath of everyone in the room catch. Family for Daniel Collins? My heart dropped. I saw the flicker of fear splinter through Jacob's face. "That's me," he said, rushing toward the doctor, his resolve amplified by dread. What happened next felt like a slow-motion cascade. Greg pushed through the crowd at that moment, entering the waiting area from a side door, breathless and wild-eyed, as the doctor spoke to Jacob just a few paces away. "We did everything we could, but he's still fighting. It's touch and go, Greg," I shouted, my voice desperate to bring him back to reality, to not let him drown in whatever pit he had fallen into. But when he looked up, confusion washed over his features, mingled with a flicker of hope. And then it hit meth raw truth that Greg stood to lose everything. I reached for him, but Greg's gaze was glued to Jacob, and I could see him processing, knowing the horizon of destruction lay ahead. "What did he mean?" Greg asked. Sharply, edging toward his brother's side, eyes blazing with apprehension. "Daniel," Jacob began, eyes darting between Greg and the doctor. Before Jacob could finish, Greg cut in, an edge of urgency slicing through his voice. "What's happening to him? What's wrong?" The doctor's features darkened, and in that moment, the room felt as though it had turned inside out. "We need you to prepare yourself," he began, but the words blurred into a haunting echo in my mind. I wanted to interject, to catch Greg's gaze, to make him understand that it wasn't just about holding on to strength anymore. But the truth crashed down on us all. I felt my heart clench in despair, and a wave of sorrow battered against the walls of my chest. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered again, illuminating a figure slipping into the waiting room, a shadow I hadn't expected. It was Daniel's childhood friend, Sarah, and in her hands, she held a crumpled orange notebook, its edges worn, as if it carried years of memory, secrets, laughter, and the very essence of who Daniel was. "What's that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's something I found at his parents' house." I thought she hesitated, looking at Greg with an unsure expression. "I thought maybe it could help. It's full of his thoughts, dreams, things he wanted to do." As her outstretched hand trembled slightly, I caught a glimpse of hope mixed with a desperate plea for connection. My heart raced at the thought of this small artifact holding the potential to bridge the chasm opened by fear and sorrow. Greg stepped forward, his expression softening as he traced the cover of the notebook with trembling fingers. "Daniel," I should have, the words trailed off, and in that moment, a flicker of vulnerability shimmered between them. The treacherous road ahead loomed large, but perhaps, amid the turbulence, there could be room for healing, and then chaos erupted as the doctor lured us back to reality. "We need to act fast. If you want to see him, now's your chance." With hearts pounding, we followed the doctor, knowing deep inside that what lay on the other side of those hospital doors would test the limits of our resilience, of our very souls. But as I cast a glance at Greg, notebook in hand and tears glistening in his eyes, I felt a jarring truth settle upon me: nothing would ever be the same again, and the path ahead was uncertain, filled with heart-wrenching revelations that we still had to face together. The sterile scent of antiseptic stung my nostrils as we hurried down the corridor, each step heavy with dread. The doctor led us to a dimly lit room at the end, full of the pervasive whir of machines and the rhythmic beeping that underlined the fragility of life. I could feel the weight of Greg beside me, every muscle tense, his grip on the notebook tightening as if it were a lifeline in a storm. When we entered the room, my heart shattered at the sight of Daniel. His body lay motionless, pale against the stark whiteness of the sheets. Tubes snaked from him like invasive vines, and the machines pulsed with an ominous mechanical hum, distancing him from the vibrant person he once was. A wave of sorrow crashed over me as I thought of all the laughter, the light, and the moments we would potentially lose forever. "Daniel," Greg's voice broke as he stepped forward, nearly stumbling as if life itself had been knocked from him. It was the anguished whisper of a brother who, in one heartbeat, found himself standing at the edge of goodbye. "I should have been here. I should have." "Greg," Jacob said softly, stepping beside him, don't. His words were a gentle embrace, yet they felt like fragile glass. Greg's sorrow was palpable, like an erupting volcano, raw and hot that I watched as Sarah, still clutching the notebook, took a hesitant step forward. Her eyes shimmered as she placed it gently on the edge of the bedside table. I thought maybe he would want it with him. He wrote so much about his dreams. Her voice quivered, the weight of hope and despair in every syllable. With shaky hands, Greg reached for it, and for the briefest moment, I saw the flicker of a sanctuary amidst the turmoil. This personal piece of Daniel held fragments of him, dreams of a future, plans for adventures, and the sonnets of his heart. I could almost believe it could pull him back from the precipice of loss, but as Greg opened the notebook, a noise from the hallway drew my attention. Urgent voices, footsteps hurried and panicked. My stomach twisted at the sound, feeling an inexplicable dread. Greg! You should. Jacob's voice fell away as a nurse rushed into the room, her face taut with urgency. There's been a development. We need to move patients. And she paused, and in that fraction of a second, I feared she carried more news than we were ready for. Please, I need both of you to follow me. As the nurse led us out, I felt the rush of adrenaline dull the pain momentarily. The fluency of movement, the guiding hand, was a strange comfort amid chaos. But as we stepped into the hallway, the truth tugging at my chest was unavoidable. What if Daniel's time was slipping away? Fear knotted in my gut, and I looked over at Greg, who had fallen silent, the weight of the notebook heavy in his hands. He had moved into a protective shell, almost as if closing himself off from the encroaching tide of reality. Greg, I whispered, but he didn't meet my gaze. Instead, he seemed lost in the tone of the distant commotion. Please, don't lose hope. His eyes flicked to mine, glistening with incredulous pain and a flaring anger that caught me off guard. How can I not? You didn't see him. You weren't there. He could. Before Greg could finish, a shout echoed down the hallway, breaking the tension like a glass shattering. Clear the area. We have critical situations here. The crowd of medical personnel surged, and in that moment, a familiar figure burst into view. Daniel's mother, her face haggard from sleepless nights, grief clinging to her like a second skin. Panic crossed her features, and I felt my heart drop. Where's my son? She demanded, her voice carving through the air, devoid of politeness, only urgency layered with fear. Ma'am, we need to escort you. The nurse started, but her words fell away as Daniel's mother pushed past us, her eyes frantic as she searched the faces in the hallway. Daniel! She cried, a sound that reverberated with raw, unfiltered anguish. Greg's resolve crumbled at the sound of her grief. Mom, he whispered, suddenly vulnerable, and I felt the emotional fracture deepen. Stay here with the notebook. I urged him, knowing he needed to cling to something tangible, something to forestall the approaching storm. No, I need to be with her, with him. Greg's voice cracked, desperation clawing at the edges of his composure. Let's stick together, I pleaded, but the weight of the situation bore down on us harder than I anticipated. With trembling hands, he nodded reluctantly but kept his eyes on the entrance to Daniel's room. As we followed his mother, I could feel Greg wavering, straddling the line between hope and despair. Stepping back into the room, the sense of immediacy intensified. Machines beeped urgently, the air heavy with tension as a new medical team entered, the nurse guiding Greg's mother with quiet urgency. Please, right this way. I held my breath, wondering whether we would be swept into the aftermath of a medical crisis too vast for us to comprehend. Would we find courage or just succumb to the disgraceful grip of sadness tightening around our hearts? Just as we were ushered to the door, Greg turned sharply. I can't just stand here. He shouted, eyes wide with disbelief. Greg. I reached for him, panic surging through me, but the nurse had already stepped in, blocking any escape. Please, you need to stay back. It's for everyone's safety. In that moment, time seemed to freeze, and a shocking revelation struck me like a thunderclap. Perhaps in our race against the clock, we were losing sight of each other. The enormity of our shared grief was pulling us apart slightly, just enough that I feared that if it continued, would be unable to hold on to the connections that still tethered us to humanity. I watched as the chaos spiraled, and with it, my heart sank. Above it all, the promise of recovery felt ever more distant. The ensuing struggle seemed inevitable as we faced the reality of what we might lose. But as the door began to narrow behind us, I could only wonder if this final confrontation would set us free or pull us into deeper despair. The deep breaths I took felt desperate, and as I turned back to Greg, his eyes held an urgency that mirrored my own fears. At that moment, one thought burned brighter than all the others. Sometimes, letting go of the things we hold on to the most can lead to heartbreaking revelations we never saw coming. The hum of the machines grew louder in my ears, resonating with the turmoil within me. Greg was right beside me, pale and trembling, facing the uncertainty of what lay ahead. We both stood in a maelstrom of fear, the mere thought of losing Daniel clawed at our very souls. Can't we do something? Greg finally managed, his voice a threadbare whisper. Can't we just, Greg, I said, the urgency of my tone flooding the space between us. We have to wait. We have to, but before I could finish, the door swung open again, and a doctor, weary and haggard, stepped inside with an intensity that cut through the chaos. The situation has changed, he announced, glancing between the gathered family. We need to act quickly. I felt Greg's fingers tighten around mine, ice-cold and desperate. Is he going to? Greg couldn't bring himself to finish the thought, and yet we all understood the gravity of what lay before us. The doctor hesitated, his brow creased with the weight of difficult decisions. We're doing everything possible. We need to transfer him for further monitoring, to see if we can stabilize his condition. But time is of the essence. Greg inhaled sharply, the movement an involuntary gasp of hope and fear intermingling into one. What if it's too late? He uttered softly, and in that moment, something inside me cracked even further. A flood of memories washed over me, moments that felt like eternity and yet vanished too soon, the laughter shared over a simple meal, the nights spent talking about dreams unfulfilled, the bonds woven tighter with each passing day. I glanced at the notebook, a physical embodiment of Daniel's spirit, now lying abandoned on the table, a silent testament to our uncertainty. Maybe we should, I began, my voice trembling, maybe we should tell stories about him. To remember him. Greg's gaze softened momentarily, as if the idea sparked a glimmer of light in the surrounding darkness. You think that'll help? It might, I responded, my heart racing as I looked toward the closed door. It might remind him that he's loved, that we're still here, fighting for him. His nod was slight, but I could sense a shift, a small window opening in a world painted gray with fear. Okay, he whispered, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty as they wandered back to the door. As the moment stretched on, I took a deep breath and turned to Daniel's mother, who was now clinging to the edge of the bed, gazing into the face of her son as if imprinting every detail into her memory. Ms. Walker, I started softly, what's one of your favorite stories about Daniel? Her gaze remained fixed ahead, a reflection of sorrow wrapped tightly in grief. Yet, the flicker of recognition surfaced, and she began, slowly, hesitantly. When he was little, he was convinced that if he, jumped off the porch with a cape on, he could fly. He had me make him one out of a bedsheet and he kept crashing into the bushes. The laughter shared with that cry for help broke softly, but like a balloon inflating, it filled the room with warmth. He thought he could save the world, like Superman. Greg offered, the corners of his mouth pulling into a half-smile, even as tears brimming in his eyes began to spill over. Exactly, she replied, a few tears starting to fall, mingling with the laughter. And he always wanted to make sure everyone was okay. Always. The energy in the room shifted, an invisible thread weaving through our hearts, binding us in the shared light of memories. We began to talk about more stories, to unfurl the chapters of Daniel's life one cherished moment at a time. The doctor exited momentarily, but I could feel his presence lingering, as though somehow encouraging our tales. Amidst the gentle ebb and flow of laughter and reminiscence, I caught sight of Greg's deepening frown. The flicker of warmth gave way to shadows, and my heart raced as I recognized that look. The realization of impending loss hung heavy over him, and it sounded alarm bells deep within me. Suddenly, the door burst open again, and a flurry of nurses poured into the room, faces painted with urgency. We need to move. One of them instructed, but before I could process what was happening, another nurse rushed to Daniel's side, preparing for transport. The chaos that ensued shattered the moment we had created as a family. It dragged us back to the harsh reality that time was slipping through our fingers, and with it, the very essence of Daniel. Greg's hold on my hand tightened painfully, panic plastered across his features. "No, no, no. Not yet," he cried, lunging toward the bed. "We need more time, Greg." The nurse intervened, frantic, pulling him back as the team rustled to mobilize the machinery with methodical precision. "We have to do this. We're out of time." My heart dropped as the sheer turbulence of the situation dizzied me. And the dreaded thought gnawed at me, what if this was the last time we really got to say goodbye? Tears streamed down his mother's cheeks, resonating with a sorrow that rippled through us like a shockwave. "Just hang on, Daniel, please," I shouted, the desperation seeping into my bones. As the gurney wheeled away, I caught a glimpse of Daniel's face, pale, fragile, yet somehow resolute, his spirit unfurling against the pressing darkness surrounding him. And at that moment, an unexpected thought rang true. Maybe we were not just fighting against the clock, we were fighting for the very essence of love itself. But as the door slid closed, an unraveling spark ignited inside me, a seedling of dread. A shaky revelation echoed in my mind, hauntingly familiar. Sometimes love means facing the impossible odds, even when it feels like we're standing on the edge of a chasm. With every heartbeat, I wondered if this darkness would reveal the light guiding us home or leave us stranded and lost forever. The waiting room felt like an endless expanse of time, each tick of the clock echoing louder and louder as if mocking our turmoil. Greg's face was etched with raw emotion, and I could feel the weight of his fears beginning to slowly consume him. I wanted to reach out, to pull him back from that precarious edge, where hope and despair danced dangerously close to one another. "Why is it taking so long?" Greg's voice cracked like glass, the edges splintering under the strain of his worry. I glanced toward the chunky doors separating us from Daniel, and my own heart raced, a companion to his faltering breaths. "That I don't know," I admitted, trying to keep my voice even despite the turmoil I couldn't suppress. "But they're doing everything they can." But how could I convince him, or myself, that everything would turn out all right? The air was thick with the scent of sterile solutions, and it wrapped around us like a suffocating shroud. I could see the flickering television on the wall, but the images were just flashes, a world outside too bright and too carefree for our aching hearts. As we paced the floor, each footfall weighed down by silence, the sound of the intercom crackled to life, jolting us out of our spiral. In another universe, Daniel could have been listening to his favorite band blaring from the speakers, but here, we were adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Our hearts synchronized to the rhythm of waiting, an agonizing melody streaked with fear. Minutes stretched, and then hours, before a doctor stepped back through the door, dark circles shadowing his eyes. I barely held my breath while Greg visibly flinched, the taut line of his shoulders tightening even further. "Daniel's been stabilized for the moment," the doctor explained, and though relief began to melt some of the ice within me, exhaustion weighed heavily in his voice. "He still requires intensive monitoring. We'll need you to consider." Before the words faded away into the ether, one thought struck with the force of a tidal wave: we'd have to make decisions we were never prepared for. I turned toward Greg, whose eyes shone with fierce determination, a flicker of fierce resolve slicing through the veils of helplessness. "We can't give up on him," he breathed, locked in fierce determination. He wouldn't give up on us. Suddenly, his declaration rang louder than a battle cry. Could we channel the strength of those memories, the days when Daniel believed he was invincible? The laughter resumed, a heartbeat beneath our shared anxiety, a gentle reminder that our hero fought fiercely. "Daniel was born ready to save the world," I said, my voice trembling but steady. The fervor in my heart echoed through my veins, reminding me of that little boy bouncing off bushes to scrape his knees. He wouldn't want us to fold now. Let's share all the stories we can, keep that spirit alive. And yet, just as hope began weaving itself through the gaps left by dread, another nurse appeared and gestured toward us, hesitant yet urgent. "We have to discuss something with you too," she said, reluctance in her tone. A shadow passed through the room as we followed her to a quieter corner, where voices lowered and the weight of impending uncertainty visibly thickened the air around us. While Daniel is stable, we need to discuss his prognosis. He might not regain full function, and her words trailed off, the implications hanging like a heavy drape, suffocating my mind. There may be significant impact on his future quality of life. The world shifted under my feet, and it felt like being submerged in thick fog. I glanced at Greg, stricken by the sheer aftermath of reality crashing in. The flicker of hope I had tried to build felt as fragile as a spider's web, ready to break with each gentle breeze. "That we can't lose him like that," Greg whispered, blinking rapidly as if pushing back the tears that threatened to spill. "Not the Daniel we know. He's still in there, fighting." The nurse regarded us with cards laid bare on the table of our emotions, her expression a mixture of empathy and concern. "We want to find every way to help, but you cross into new territory, the power of choice, of hope. Sometimes, in uncertainty lies strength." But my heart felt a wrenching silence that pressed down on me, forcing the other shoe to drop. Would hope be enough? As the nurse spoke, another wave of uncertainty crashed over us. Was it correct to cling to hope? To allow ourselves to believe in a miracle? Just then, Greg's phone buzzed with a message, snapping me from the throes of uncertainty. Eagerly, he glanced at the screen, but as he read, his face turned pallid, a stone dropping into the depths of his eyes. "It's my brother," he stammered, the tremors of fear creeping back. "He says there's something I need to know about Daniel." "Something important." As the doctor's voice faded in the background, I could almost hear the gears of fate shifting, every word exchanging the balance of our lives. What could possibly be more important? My heart raced, sensing the undercurrents of change washing over us. What if this glimmering oasis of hope was turning into a mirage instead? What if all that lay ahead was heartbreak? "Greg," I started, but the words were stolen by the rising tide of panic surging as I watched the color drain from his face. The world around us felt like a fragile facade, and now more than ever, I realized that perhaps the greatest revelations come not in moments of clarity but in the shuddering depths of despair. And there it was, a painful knot in my chest, a dawning realization that we had only begun to scrape the surface of the heartbreak waiting to unfold. When that final text from Greg's brother came through, something snapped within me. It coursed like voltage through my veins, electrifying fear, confusion, and desperation into a single moment of suspense. The room around us closed in, and all I could hear was the pulsing beat of my heart echoing against the stark walls, mixed with the distant sound of machines breathing for Daniel. "Let's go outside," I urged, feeling as if the air was suddenly too thick for either of us to breathe. Greg nodded, his expression a haunting mix of anguish and determination. We found our way to a small courtyard, shielded from the frantic energy pulsating inside the hospital, leaves rustling softly in the twilight as if sharing in the secrets we were afraid to speak. "Greg, what's happening?" I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "What did Daniel say?" He fumbled with his phone, his eyes glazed over with fear as he searched for the message, searching for the words that became tangled like vines in his mind. They were talking about his treatment," he stammered, revealing just enough to keep me on edge. "He said he didn't want to burden anyone. God, he made me promise not to tell you." "Promise to not tell me what?" Panic laced my words as I stepped closer, desperate for clarity that felt just out of reach. "Greg, you have to tell me. Daniel has been more than sick," he began, voice cracking under the pressure of the weight he'd been carrying alone. "He's been in and out of therapy and I thought it was just his way of coping with the illness. But it's deeper. He didn't want me to worry." A cold wave washed over me, an understanding glimmering in the shadows. "You mean it's not just the cancer? That's what I'm afraid of." Greg's eyes reflected the storm within him, a tempest swirling around pain, fear, and disbelief. "He's been dealing with depression, too. This whole time. He felt like he couldn't show it, especially with us worried about his health." A shiver ran down my spine, the implications settling heavier upon us. We were fighting not just for Daniel's life, but also for his spirit, enduring the weight of not being enough. I felt my chest tighten, emotions flooding as I grasped not only the severity of Daniel's condition but the vulnerability we all carried. why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, a wave of sorrow crashing into the very core of my being. We could have figured this out together. He needed us. Greg's voice faltered, a broken whisper as he rubbed at his eyes, desperate for clarity amidst the chaos. I wanted to keep him safe. I thought if I was strong enough, it would shield him from everything. The words hung nauseatingly heavy, fear stitching through my heart. But strength isn't in sacrificing your own pain, Greg. It's about sharing it, letting others help carry the burden that I thought being there meant not bending, he murmured. Tears glittered in his eyes, shimmering with grief. I was just trying to be the brother he needed, and that's why you're suffering, I said, feeling the deep resonance of pain in my own chest, a mirror to his struggles. But you're not alone. Not anymore. Just then, Greg's phone buzzed again, breaking the thick tension, urgency woven through the sound. He glanced down, trembling fingers freezing over the screen. It's Jacob again. My heart leapt into my throat, urgency coiling into a tight knot. Answer it, I urged, gripping his shoulder, my voice both a plea and a command. With shaking hands, he pressed the call button, the connection crackling to life. Jacob? He spoke, voice shaky yet vulnerable. Greg, listen. There are no easy answers right now, but Daniel needs you. And we're not going to give up on him. Jacob's voice was resolute, a rallying cry amidst the storm surrounding us. He needs to know he's not alone. You must go to him, fight for him. I don't know if I can, Greg whispered, his voice fracturing, but I felt the flicker of resolve ignite within him just beneath the weight of despair. The fragile flame of hope dared to flicker. Yes, you can, I interjected, my heart pounding with fervor. Well, go together. We won't let him fight alone. Greg, I watched him wrestle with the weight of everything he carried, the guilt, the fear, the knowledge that opened up like a gash in his chest. If we step back into that room, it's not giving up, I said firmly, the fire of my conviction ablaze. It's choosing to love, choosing to embrace the full spectrum of pain with hope. It was almost as if the revelation surged through him, filling the cracks in his spirit, solidifying the bond between us so that there emerged a resolve as powerful as a tidal wave. It's about time we did this together, isn't it? He murmured, eyes brightening, a tender smile creeping through despite the pain. Always together, I replied, gently squeezing his shoulder. Let's fight this fight for Daniel. Let's remind him that we're in this with him until the end. In that moment, we turned to face the looming darkness together, hand in hand. Together, we took tentative steps back through the doors, the sterile air thick with trepidation, but our spirits fortified for the battle ahead. As we crossed the threshold into Daniel's room, the soul-chilling reality of the machines filled the air, the beeping echoing with a profound reminder of life clinging to a thread. But neither of us faltered. Taking a deep breath, we stepped into the light of existence as we prepared to anchor ourselves to Daniel's fight. Daniel. Greg called, his voice trembling with fear and affection. I'm here. As Daniel's eyelids flickered and met our shared gaze through the haze of despair, I could almost feel the walls crumbling between us, love flooding the gap, a love that transcended everything we feared to face. In that moment, I realized that the deepest revelations don't always come wrapped in clarity, they come through fear and pain, layers upon layers peeling away until what remains is the essence of what truly matters. The courage hidden in love, the love that reminds us that together, in the throes of chaos or heartbreak, we still have one another, and that, perhaps against all odds, we can rise above the storm. As we leaned together, embracing a brother in desperate need, I felt the warmth fill the room amidst the cold reality that surrounded us, intertwined with grief. And just as quiet settled around us, I understood that sometimes, love doesn't shield us from loss, it prepares us to face it, heart first. And in the depths of that understanding, I whispered, we love you, Daniel.